Hey everybody, I'm Joey.
And I'm Rachel, and this is Good Things to Watch with Joey and Rachel, a podcast with two pals who watch a lot of movies and TV. We'll be taking a deep dive into our favorite films and shows and sharing insights as to what you should be watching too.
Today, we'll be taking each other to virtual court to determine which decade represents our favorite films across multiple genres, the 80s or the 90s.
Just a word of warning, these episodes will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen any of these films, what are you waiting for? Go watch them all and then come back.
All right, Rachel, let's hear what you got over here in our first BFF battle, because I'm really curious to see how you're quote unquote taking me to court.
Well, would you like to hear my opening statement?
You can go right ahead and give whatever statements you want, but it's not going to change the outcome of what's happening here today.
Oh, okay. All right. My discerning jury. The 80s were all about extravagance. The hairstyles, the makeup, the earrings, the watches. Everything was big and bright, but it was also huge in heart. I submit to you, the court of public opinion, that the films of the 80s serve as proof that as awkward, bereft, and insecure as we believed we were, we could also rise to battle the tyranny of parental authority, discover who we are, and find love where you least expect it. Thank you.
All right. Everything she just said is BS. Thank you. In the words of one of the greatest comedies to ever take place and made in 1992, my cousin Vinny, the greatest man alive. But to get a little bit more serious and to talk about my side of things, the 90s was, and will always be, in my opinion, the last true generation of adventurers where people weren't glued to their cell phones, the internet, but also to discover what it actually was and could weave it into our stories and relate to both the interconnected world and before that as well. But yeah, that's basically what I got for you, Rachel.
Okay. Well, then let's throw down.
Oh my God, here we go. So how we're going to work this is we're going to talk about some of our favorite movies from each genre, from horror, comedy, action, romance, teen. And I hope you don't mind, I threw in some animated as well, because I figure why not bring in some animation with you too?
All right. Okay. Okay, then. I see how you are.
So since we just got out of the Halloween season and you and I just recently led the best trivia game for our workplace ever, I think, on Halloween trivia, why don't we start with horror and talk about what we think is the best horror films and why?
Okay. Would you like to start? Would you like me to?
You can go for it.
Okay. Well, I have many favorites in the 80s, but we did agree to 5, so I tried to pick across subgenres.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First up is Children of the Corn.
Ooh, okay.
Yes. Love Children of the Corn. I've loved that movie since it came out, and I just enjoy watching it over and over again.
Do you ever watch the sequels?
I have. I watched all the way. I don't know about what they have now, but the last one I watched was The Return of Isaac or something like that. I think it was something like that. It was, it was bad, but they did try to tie it back to the first movie in certain ways. So I did appreciate that, but sequels just weren't very good.
Gotcha.
They Live.
Oh, I love They Live. The one with the glasses and the bubble gum.
Yes, Rowdy Roddy Piper. I don't know who thought it'd be a good idea to put a wrestler in a horror movie, but it actually worked out very well. I love Roddy and I love that movie. I just think it's so great. Like the way he can see the aliens and then see all the subliminal messaging on the billboards, which kind of speaks to how messaging and advertising works in our brains anyway.
Yeah, it is interesting because it still really holds up today, and I feel like that movie wasn't as, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it kind of like not as big when it first came out?
Oh yeah, it's truly gained a cult following.
Yeah, I love the when they look at the money and I say it's like this is your god.
Right, exactly,
So,
exactly. Even more familiar is you look at a billboard, and instead of being a product advertisement for whatever product there is, it just says obey,
yeah,
follow. And it does really kind of speak to, especially today, now that we have so much advertising right in our faces.
yeah.
Up next, Halloween 3.
Halloween 3, you're taking
Yes.
like, one of my favorite sequels that have nothing to do with the story.
Exactly. I mean, not only is it a very underrated horror film, it's very underrated in the Halloween series in general. I mean, I was kind of thrown off at first too when I saw it. What? No Michael Myers? Where's the knife? Where's all the slashings? Where's the pumpkin? But then I realized, like halfway into it, that I no longer missed Michael Myers. I was getting sucked right into the story, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that just it stands out to me.
Rachel, I object.
Why? On what grounds?
It's devastating to my case.
Overruled.
Okay. Oh well, I see we have a judge here as well. Fine, I agree with you on Halloween 3. I love Halloween 3. Admittedly, I didn't like it either when it first came out. I really wasn't sure. I guess I was such a fan of Michael Myers, and the Halloween series is my favorite horror series, period. But it's very much because of Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers being the killer and that, pale, emotionless drive he's got. However, I will say this: I grew to love Halloween 3 in its own right. Um, I really, really like the music. And I think it feels the first, second, and third one all feel like their own trilogy in a way, where once you get to the fourth one, granted, it was several years, I think it was 88, the fourth one came out. Um, there was just something removed, you know?
Agreed. Next up is Poltergeist.
Oh my God, you got Poltergeist?
Yes, true classic. I I watched it. When it came out, or actually the first time I had the opportunity to see it was on HBO when it first came out to HBO, and I begged my mom to let me stay up to watch it. And she said, after some arguing, it was okay as long as you go right to bed after. I did go right to bed after. I just didn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
I couldn't. And especially seeing as there was a tree very similar to Robbie's tree.
I think we all had Robbie's tree.
That was in my neighbor's yard and right outside my window. So it was scary, but it was magnificent. I can't say enough about Poltergeist.
What's your favorite part of the movie?
Well, favorite people kind of like look at me like, are you crazy? Because it does get scary. And if your favorite part is a scary part, it's like, are you demented? I think one of my favorite parts is when they believe the house to be clean and the kids are up in the room and the monster comes out of the closet and you finally see the beast.
Yeah.
It's scary, but I also love the part too where she and the mother fall into the tub and they're just connected and they have everybody's back, and so I find those heartwarming moments about it too.
Mm-hmm.
I
feel like that movie really did a great job of not being too depending on if you're watching the TV version or not too gruesome with that one scene with the mirror. But also being like terrifying. Like they didn't really, I don't believe they curse in the movie very much. It's just a very clean family film.
Except for the marijuana use.
Right. but almost in the way they do that, they address that almost kind of like whatever. It's such a quick thing, you know. And I was even, it's a surprising thing for that time frame that they just took so whatever and easily, you know.
Well, I mean, but then again, I mean, and I'm not a user, but if I had been through that experience, I think I might be tempted to do that.
Well, I mean, hey, I mean, your daughter got sucked into the closet. I mean, think people start needing a little bit of relief. I get it.
I do also like when they get to the hotel and the first thing he does is unplug the TV and shove it right outside.
Yeah, yeah, I love that movie. That's always a family favorite of my family's. And I think because we had a bunch of kids in my family. My mom kind of even looked a little bit like the woman from the movie. So um, I really like it's about the mom's journey and like the most innocent looking little girl in the world got kidnapped. And it's like your worst nightmare. However, I really don't care for the sequels all that much.
You know, I've gotten used to them over the years. I like two better than three. Three is just
Nightmare.
no, it's a nightmare, and not for the right reasons. Uh, Two, I think, is pretty good. It just doesn't come close.
It
Um,
does. It
but
really doesn't.
Heather O'Rourke is just so sweet and innocent, and she was, from every account that I've ever read about her, she knew her lines
Mhm.
amazingly. She read the script early at her young age, and she was able to memorize it all. She knew everybody else's lines, and she was such a little doll,
Yeah.
so sweet and innocent that she was the perfect casting choice for that, I think. And Jo Beth Williams and Craig T. Nelson,
Oh,
everybody is amazing.
they're really great. I love Craig T. Nelson. That was your
Yeah.
fourth, right?
That was my fourth, my last, and probably my one of my top two horror movies of all time. Sleepaway Camp.
Oh yeah.
True underground cult following with this B-rated horror movie. Um, Not a big budget at all, very low budget.
Yeah.
Still, I love this movie. It's fantastic. It's one of those movies though where people aren't sure they've seen it until you say, "Well, did you see the end?" Where
Mhm.
that's how everybody knows this movie is by that
Yeah.
ending, which I'm not going to give that away. Also, it's kind of like a little, you know, not so appropriate to talk about.
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah. I love the shot at the end though, because it's such a creepy looking shot with it just static holding his face still, and it's really creepy.
it,
A little dated in the because of the reason why it's scary. I totally get it. Like makes complete sense that it's a very frightening thing. But nowadays it's like it's a tougher like, oh, is it just because of the reason like was that the reason they were the killer kind of thing?
you know what? We're in this to discuss it, and we've already given a spoiler warning. So I'm just going to come out and say it
Go
because we got to be able to discuss this.
go for it.
That's the image that everybody remembers at the end. I watched it when I wasn't supposed to, when I was way too young to be watching this. I think everybody, despite the fact that it's a low budget B horror movie, I love everybody in it. Um, the beautiful Felissa Rose,
Mhm.
she's actually, Sleepaway Camp has had like a resurgence in the past 20 years. Um, and so people are finding it again. And so Felissa's actually able to go out there and promote the film now. I'm glad that it's come back around.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Sleepaway Camp is one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
I think what's great about it too is that you don't have the traditional 80s slasher that you expected it to be. It
Right.
kind of turns you on your head, and I think especially in the 80s, in my opinion, a very formulaic decade, if you ask me. No, I'm kidding. I love the 80s,
No, but
um,
that's true. That is very true.
but I would say definitely cool that they're able to be that different with it and kind of change. I mean, it's not really changing the this gender of the person, like the gender swap, because technically it's still a guy. But I think that kind of speaks to it in a little way as it is. Granted, Mrs. Voorhees was the killer of Friday the 13th, so there's that as well.
Well, you know, though, it did kind of it did kind of cross some boundaries, and it did do a lot of taboo things. Like up until that point, you really don't see a lot of murders of small children.
Yeah.
And although you can't clearly make out the details in that scene, when one of the counselors takes a bunch of the younger kids out camping and then they all turned out slashed. So, I mean, it is a little grisly, but on VHS, it's like, it's so cloudy, you really can't make it out. But it really does stand out for the theming. You know, you have this kooky aunt who, for whatever reason, decides that she doesn't want a second little boy and ends up making this poor little boy grow up as a girl. I mean, that's, you know, pretty significant, and exactly why he internalized all this rage.
Yep. Yeah. It's a really good one. I'll give you that one.
And people and kids at camp just can't be nice.
Yeah.
Had they just left Angela alone, you know, Judy got hers.
Mm-hmm. I like your 5. They weren't. I wasn't expecting all of them, honestly. I was expecting to hear one of my favorite guys along in there, but don't worry, I brought him into my countdown. So I'm just gonna start jumping into my 5.
Please, I want to know. I want to know what's on your list.
So my number 5, and what I think was a major mistake on your list, obviously, because there's fantastic film evidence for the 80s that you neglected to present to the court. But I think we have to include on my side of things Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Nightmare on Elm Street is by far one of my favorite horror movies ever. I think Freddy Krueger is fantastic. However, something that the rest of the movies really got wrong with Freddy is that they made him too jokey, 1. And 2, I think the big thing that really ruins most horror movies is knowing too much about the villain. Like giving them an orange and letting them know, oh, their mother was a priest who was raped by a whole bunch of prisoners, and then also on top of that he was a child murderer, and then he's a child molester, and then he made this deal with demons. Got ridiculous. I really like Wes Craven's New Nightmare because they really took a chance and changed up the formula. Had Freddy Krueger come out of the movies and attack the actors and creators. Totally nuts. Like, still to this day, what a weird concept. And it worked. They brought back Heather Langenkamp. She was awesome in it. It was nice to see Nancy again in a way. And it kind of did H2O and all these like long-winded retcons before it was a thing to do. And I think Nancy is one of my favorite all-time heroes in any horror movie. She's one of the best final girls, and I don't think she gets enough credit. And just a fun little nod in the movie. In the credits, Freddy Krueger, it's listed as playing himself. And I just love that. It's so creepy. He looks different. It's more frightening. It's definitely scarier in it. And it's really impressive that they were able to do that and make it such an out there movie. Like, you literally are watching A Nightmare on Elm Street, the film, within the movie itself. So,
you know, I have not seen that movie in a few years now, probably, well, a long time, but now you're making me want to watch it again. So good on you, Joey.
It is the second best Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It is such a mind-blowing thing to me that the 7th movie in the interesting though, so was the 7th movie of Halloween.
That's very true.
That's weird.
It's like after all those awful sequels or not as great sequels, they finally learned by the 7th film.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next on your list?
Now I kind of want to rearrange some. Because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an honorable mention of Halloween H2O as well. Just because it kind of goes along with that same feeling of that whole big comeback. I think 2018 also did it, and that's why I didn't put that on the list entirely, because it's already done that multiple times. But Halloween H2O, great honorable mention. But my number 4, to go back to the true list, Candyman.
Oh, nice pick.
Really frightening movie. Truly scared me. Kind of plays on that. Is it Bloody Mary you say in the mirror? Like you say the name 5 times or something like that, and then they appear and
Yes.
apparently kill you, and which would make you wonder why you would want to do that. But there's so much about him that scares me. I love the mystery of it. I love that it's in a city, because you feel like you should feel safe, like there's people all around and this thing can't get you. Like, for example, she sees him first in a parking garage, which is in the middle of the day, which is like, oh, wow, he's just going to get her. And it's just so gruesome. I love how he's framing her. I love the story of Candyman, his voice, the hook, everything's so scary, and the ending's terrifying. I love Candyman.
Very nice.
Definitely one of my favorites.
Very nice. It was very creepy film.
It was. Number 3, Silence of the Lambs. Got Hannibal Lecter on my team, and the good one too. Not to say Brian Cox is a bad Hannibal Lecter. I just think that Manhunter movie was subpar, and its remake was also subpar. But Silence of the Lambs, truthfully, I don't find this movie scary. I've never been afraid of this movie, and I don't know why, because I know people are terrified of it. I love the relationship between Clarice and Hannibal. I love that Hannibal's only in the movie for like 10 minutes, but they edited it so perfectly that you feel like he's in the whole movie. Buffalo Bill's a great villain. I just love the cop stuff. I love the evidence, and it's so interesting to me. I don't count it as a horror movie. And personally, I'm still waiting on the day, and I think we could still get it one day, I'd love to see a long-winded retcon movie with Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. We're running out of time here, but I'd love to see them come back together for another installment in which they pretend Hannibal never happened, and it just follows up years later after Hannibal escaped in Silence of the Lambs. I think that'd be just fantastic. So that's my number 3.
I think I'm just gonna say I think we kind of made this episode a little long-winded, in our choices. So I think we should just have fun with it. If it's long-winded, it's long-winded.
I think so too. My top 2, I'll say this: they're not my super favorite movies, but I think they're best representative of the decade and really challenged the genre in general. So number 2, The Blair Witch Project.
Absolutely.
The found footage thing was certainly there before it, but it definitely was the movie that just made it iconic. I just think really interesting how they made the movie and how they weren't feeding the actors or feeding them less and less, and really kept them on the outside of what was happening as well. Really interesting choices. I love that you don't see the villain, and I think that's super important in a lot of movies, and really effective there. I think anyone who I think I have a friend or a family member that said, like, after they saw it, like, oh, you can't really see anything. It's all shaky. It's this and that. You want to throw up, and you don't know anything that's going on. I hate haters, because they're just trying to prove something. Like, they don't go with the grain or with the crowd, and that's totally fine if you have to be that. But you can't deny what that movie did with so little was just spectacular and really, really great filmmaking. And it goes to show you don't need a huge budget or a Hollywood background to make something awesome. Really awesome movie, and changed, I think, the horror genre forever. And my number 1 is obviously Scream. You can't deny Scream also not only changed the genre forever, brought back the slasher to the 90s, and also commented on all the genre itself. It's a spoof within a spoof. You had that whole switcheroo with Drew Barrymore. You're thinking she's the main character in the beginning, and you kill her in the first 5 minutes. Super reminiscent of A Nightmare on Elm Street with Tina, with both Wes Craven movies. Henry Winkler's in it, and he's the mean principal. oh, come on, he was the Fonz and he's a mean principal. I really loved everything about Scream, and I think it just absolutely defines the 90s horror genre. I think it just set the standard, and then you got things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and kind of follow-ups to that. And not to mention, aside from Scream 3, which is still okay, all of the sequels to Scream are pretty good. They're all pretty good movies. Like I could watch all four of them and be totally happy.
Okay, I see I have my work cut out for me.
Uh-huh. Let's see what you got for your comedies when we get to that.
Okay. Shall we start with comedy?
I mean, we might as well. I mean, I threw it into my opening statement.
Okay. Now this I had a tough time with because some of my movies, they can cross genres, so that made it a little more difficult in some
Same.
areas. So I kind of like had to play a logic puzzle. Okay, so I'm going to start with Spaceballs.
Great one. Awesome.
Love Spaceballs. I love the fact that it's a parody on so many movies, not just Star Wars. You have Star Trek, you have Planet of the Apes. Love it. Airplane.
Oh, that's a great one.
Airplane. There's just so much going on in that movie, and it's so utterly ridiculous that you can't help but love it.
It really gave way to spoofs too.
It really did. It's one of the ultimate parodies.
I'll say this though, I think the Airplane creators lost their touch with Scary Movie 3 because they brought in them for Scary Movie 3, and a lot of people apparently like it, and people say it's an improvement on the second. Really bugs me because I think the second one's hilarious, and I think the third one's garbage. It's probably because of a PG-13 rating, but I've said my piece. Sorry.
That's fine. That's what this is. This is the discussion, Joey. I still look back at Airplane. And I still laugh at all the same stuff, and it's just a classic.
Don't you call me Shirley?
Don't call me Shirley. National Lampoon's Vacation.
Oh my freaking God.
Yes. It's a classic. It's a classic. It's the ultimate hell for this family because they're on this road trip, and spending so much time. And actually, I mean, if you think about it now, I mean, spending so much time with your family confined in one place, you start to lose it a bit. And Clark has clearly lost it. I mean, he loves this. This is what he wants. He wants this confinement with his family all the way to California.
I completely forgot that was the 80s. It really bugs me.
It just all the ridiculous shenanigans that happen along the way.
Did you see the new one with Ed Helms? I never watched it.
I didn't. Yeah.
I just feel like that one was trying so hard to be rebooty, and like Ed Helms had a line in the trailer. It's like, oh, hopefully this vacation will kind of just stand on its own. I'm like, stop being self-aware. That was never this series, but great choice. I'm jealous. Honestly, the first one though is like my second least favorite one. I like the Christmas one's my favorite, then Vegas, and then that one, and then European. I was never crazy about.
I really kind of, with these two, I really kind of wanted to shy away from some of the things that we may discuss in another episode. So I kind of restricted myself in a way, just so that I could save that for then. But they're certainly worthy of being included. Yeah.
So that's Spaceballs, and what was it? And
Spaceballs, Airplane, and National Lampoon's Vacation.
Let me throw three at you then to rebut.
Okay. Yes.
All right. For Airplane, my answer to Airplane is Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. Also a spoof film. I love all three movies. I think they're so funny. I love the henchman named Random Task. Like, what? and who throws a shoe? Honestly, oh my God. I loved Austin Powers. It kind of upset me in the sequels, but I get it because it's supposed to be a spoof on James Bond, that he has different girls each time. but it's cool. But I yeah, really love Austin Powers. Thought Mike Myers was at the height of his popularity at the time, and rightfully so. And for me, he never really has to do anything more. That's fine. That could be it. Um, let's see. You had Spaceballs, and what was the other one after that?
Airplane
Airplane, Spaceballs, and what was the last one?
and National Lampoon's Vacation.
Gotcha. Which one am I gonna fight you with next? I'll give you another road trip movie. Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
One of my favorites. Love Jim Carrey. I think Jim Carrey in general should be just a topic in here because Jim Carrey. Maybe we can do an episode on him in general. I'm not sure how you feel about him. Actually, I don't know if we've spoken about him
Well,
before.
that would be a good debate.
I really think I feel like you can feel that man's heart through his performances, even if he's acting ridiculous. He's got a lot of heart to him, but he's so funny, he's so physical. Him and Jeff Daniels, you wouldn't think before that movie, yeah, good, mix them up, but they were great together. And Jeff Daniels got some comedy chops too. And I really, really love Dumb and Dumber. And this one also definitely falls more into Christmas and holiday, and we'll probably want to talk about this more. But I'm going to include Home Alone. I just think it's one of the most iconic films ever. But I just think what an iconic film. You had Joe Pesci in a family movie. I think it's what an interesting concept for a holiday movie that also got so hugely popular. So that's why I bring this into here. As my third choice. I'll leave my last two for after we hear back from you and go back to the 80s for a moment there.
Okay, sure. Let's take a trip back in time.
Your synth wave world you come from with the big hair and the eyeliner.
Oh God, my hair was big at times. Well, yeah, that's a whole other discussion. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, good one. Bill.
Yes. Some of the jokes in there don't hold up today. I mean, a lot of what we thought was funny back then is really not so funny.
Yeah.
And so some of the jokes really don't hold up, but the movie itself does for me. I love these two. I love Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves. They made for the ultimate Valley guys.
Yeah, they were great. Keanu Reeves really killed it with that movie.
And just like the whole time travel thing and building time travel into a comedy like that and grabbing these historical figures who you find out are just as funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Would you like to go ahead with your next one? Because I know we were supposed to be going back and forth.
Sure, yeah. I'm trying to think of which one I want to push up first. I'll go because I already started talking about Jim Carrey again. Ace Ventura. Both of them are great in their own right. I think Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, is more of a raw, let's just see what we can do with this character kind of film. But it works. He's hilarious, and he works really well in those zany situations. But I really love Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I think him and Courtney Cox had great chemistry, and it's really nice to see him not as over the top, but he's really funny working with more people and not these super crazy situations that he runs into in the second one. But love Ace Ventura.
Okay.
Let's hear your number one for the comedies of the 80s.
And I'm not sure if you were ranking them in order. I really wasn't, because I had such a hard time even just building just five that I just threw them in there. But the last one on my list is Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom, really?
Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton's the man.
He is. And everything about that movie is just funny to me, and it's such a good story, and seeing his shenanigans playing the stay-at-home dad.
Yeah, that's great. I love Michael Keaton. I love that's a great callback, because I feel like in this resurgence of Keaton that we're having right now, which I hope never ends, that's a really good callback. I wouldn't have thought of that one.
I love watching that movie anytime that I can find it somewhere. For some reason, it's not out on DVD.
Oh, that's weird.
So yeah, it's really hard to track down. But I love it. I love every minute of it.
Gotcha. Well, I think this last one I have is certainly going to defeat you. But I don't know, Bill and Ted, that's a tough one to beat. And I think we're going to let the audience decide who wins this, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
The court of public opinion.
court of public opinion. One of the craziest courts around ever since the 20s. Office Space.
Oh, that's a great one.
I love Office Space. I think something cool about Office Space is it's a lot of people who aren't the biggest comedians or actors ever. I mean, you got Jennifer Aniston, but I feel like it's just because it was the 90s and yet she just kind of got on whatever train was coming her way. But so funny, such a comment on the workplace that's still relevant today, very relevant today. Like sometimes when we're at work, like 9 months ago, uh, it just feels like Bill Lumberg's gonna walk on by the cubicle and like, oh, I'm gonna need you to come in tomorrow too. Oh, and Sunday as well. And there's so many iconic lines in that movie, and so gray. And it's just like I think it's a real comment on 90s films in general, because you get things like that and Fight Club and a bunch of these like men not being enough of who they're supposed to be in the 90s, which is I think really interesting. And I think it's a more of a time of peace in general, like with ourselves or with whatever's going on in the world. And I think that might have something to do with it. There's just some complacency, and it's like, oh, we found peace. We revolted in the 80s against our parents and the mayor and people who are randomly taking over our small Texas town, and now there's nothing to do. So I think Office Space is really interesting because it's kind of commentary on that time in general.
It is, and that poor guy. He took my stapler.
Oh my God, that poor man and his stapler. Just give him his swing line stapler already.
That poor guy had a rough few days. Oh, okay.
We're killing it.
I do have actually, I would like to throw in an honorable mention to the comedy
Please.
series, because what happens is I come up with my list and then I dare tell my husband and he goes, well, yeah, but you love this movie too. And I'm like, face palm. Moving Violations.
I don't know that one.
Mid 80s, John Murray, Stacy Keach's brother, James Keach. There's a whole list. Fred Willard, Wendy Jo Sperber, Clara Peller, who was the Where's the Beef lady from the Wendy's commercials. She's only in it briefly, but you have a few names in there. If you look at it, you'd see the names in there. Sally Kellerman. And it's just about this group of people who can't get out of their own way and end up in having to take a course in driving because they've gotten one ticket or another or lost their license. And this whole movie is like one big shenanigan.
I'm surprised I haven't heard of either Corey Haim. This reminds me of License to Drive, but I can't believe I haven't heard from your side yet. No, nothing on Corey Haim or Corey Feldman.
It's amazing. I love those two and I love their movies. There is something coming up for each of them.
Oh.
Just not in the category that you'd probably expect. But it is surprising to me that more of their movies did not make it on.
What do you want to jump to next? We have a couple other.
Well, we have Teen if you want. I will just say, on YouTube, you can watch Moving Violations, the whole movie. So check it out.
I'll check it out. Let's do teen. I feel like do you feel like the teen movie genre is so much more important than others for some reason? Like, I feel like because you're a kid and you grow up with something else that's representative of kids in your time, you remember it and bring it with you, and you remember yourselves as that's my group.
Yeah, and that's just it, is that growing up and becoming a teen in the 80s, for me, seeing all these movies reflecting the things that I was feeling and seeing, they really did speak to me. And even though a lot of the times you had actors playing teenagers who were well, out of the teenage years, they still brought a lot of heart to these movies, and that's why I'm so connected to them.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, these for me, I was young for these. Like I was not a teenager. I was 10 in 2000, but I still feel like I really identify with the movies of that time, kind of. I have a good memory, and I definitely am a big rewatcher. So I know things that I've been watching that I watched when I was 1 through 10. I'm still watching today, but um, I wonder. I can go first with this team
Sure,
if you'd like,
sure.
because
Go
I
for it.
might have a zinger of evidence that's really going to bug you.
Oh, you think so? Okay, go for it.
My first, and I will say this is the lowest on my totem pole, even though we're not really doing it that way for teen movies. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie. I love the comedy in it. It's really silly. It never takes itself too seriously, which I really like. You got Luke Perry, who might as well just be the king of the 90s. And it started a very successful franchise, which do you like that series? Are you a fan of Buffy? I don't
I
remember.
am. I am.
So you would say this is fantastic evidence of great movie making.
I would, even though the tone of the film is wildly different from the tone of the series, it's
Mhm.
still connected. It serves as a great prequel to the series.
And Ben
And
Affleck's in it, so that's
Ben
great.
Affleck's in it, and Paul Rubin's death scene, I
Mhm.
that just
Let's
still makes me laugh.
let's hear what you have to combat with that. Let's see what Molly Ringwald inspired film you're gonna throw at me for the teen section.
Well, and in a lot of these categories, I tried not to be so obvious, except that when you're talking 80s teen movies,
It's
there is
hard.
the obvious. It's really hard to get away from that. And especially my favorites, The Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
You have you have these kids stuck in a room together who wouldn't naturally be anywhere near each other,
Yep.
forced to spend the day together and develop these friendships, and not easily.
Hmm. Yeah.
And but they're all banding against the authority, banding together against the authority.
I love that about the 80s. That's such a thing. Is like they're always against the authority. And I kind of like the resurgence of this sort of thing now because two movies in particular, I'm sorry to jump in and just run on your
Go
80s,
for it.
but two movies in particular that's come out in the past couple of years that I adore because it really reminds me of movies of the 80s. And I know I'm fighting for the 90s here, but there's something so true about 80s movies and growing up that I really like and admire. Two movies that I think really captured are To All the Boys I Loved Before, came out on Netflix, I think 2 years ago. You don't really have to bother with the sequel. The first one, it's basically another, the same exact thing. But it just, I don't know if you haven't seen that, correct?
I have not.
Check it out. I think you'd like it because it really captures a lot of the music, the feeling, the way the kids talk to each other, but it's evolved. It's not fighting the power anymore. It's fighting injustice in itself. Like they fight a lot of ideas. And another one I really, really love is Love, Simon. Um, it is a John Hughes movie about a gay character. And it felt like John Hughes made this movie to me. It is so good. The music is fantastic. It's got this great synthy feel to it. It's really about these characters growing up. And sorry to interrupt you. That's that.
No, it's totally cool. I love the discussion.
If you're looking for two movies that are kind of representative of 80s movies now, check out those two. They're fantastic.
Okay. But that was a big theme, especially for John Hughes, because he was the king of the 80s teen movies.
Yeah.
He himself, by many accounts, did feel disconnected from his parents, and he truly did feel like when you grow up, your heart dies.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I like that.
so that was a heavy theme in his movies,
Yeah.
the kids being so disconnected from their parents.
I like how his kids aren't kids though. They're people.
Right, right. And he really made that a big thing. He really strived to do that.
Yeah.
He could, because many of us do falter to seeing teenagers as kids, and he really did see them as people.
Do you have another John Hughes on your list?
I do. I
Let's see.
do. And it's another obvious. It's 16 Candles.
Okay. Yep. Definitely.
And it kind of borders into a romance film, but it is ultimately a teen movie, and it's about the teenagery things that we all feel. Here's Samantha, everybody is ignoring her because of an older sibling, and she falls for this guy that she doesn't think that she's ever going to have in her world, and then
Yeah.
he pays attention to her, and she's like, what? This guy's paying attention to me? Meanwhile, she's got Anthony Michael Hall
Mm-hmm. Yep.
following her around.
Yep.
It's a great blend of comedy and heart.
Yeah. That poor friend zone, though.
I know, but see that's it too. The 80s were ultimate friend zones for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. That was a big thing, and I feel like it wasn't. That's something that bothers me about 80s movies. I don't think that's a real representation of life. Like, I don't think there's as many of those, oh, they should be together situations. It's just like, okay, dude would have given up by now. I don't know. That's a good one though, and I think to that I will give you Jawbreaker.
Oh, that's a good one.
I love Jawbreaker. Totally weird movie. You're not really sure if it's a horror film or not. I don't really think it is. I think it's more of like a teen drama kind of.
Kind of like a black comedy.
That's a good way to put it, but it's very dark.
It is.
Reminds me of Heathers a bit.
Right.
It might be the 90s Heathers. And I love how none of the actresses are particularly big, except for what's her name from Charmed. But I mean, even now, she's not really what she was at the time of that movie. And it was just really disturbing. It's kind of like this. I think the 90s had this thing about being perfect. And I think Bring It On really captures that too. But obviously, that's in 2000, so that can't be part of my argument. But it just feels kind of like, you have to be this perfect thing, like the character Villette. They turn her from this. It's all about makeovers. It's all about what your appearance says, and that might be kind of talking to the superficialness of the 90s. But the good thing about the 90s movies is a lot of movies talk about the subject, and it's not too much like in Grease, like, oh, she's made over now, so she's great. It's kind of like questioning that, and really dark movie, but really love it.
Jawbreaker also has Julie Benz in it. Julie Benz is best known for her role as Darla in Buffy, the TV series, and Angel.
Oh, funny. Okay, I didn't realize that. That's super cool. I never really watched the Buffy show too much. Just a little bit here.
You should. There are some episodes and seasons that are better than others, but when you have a 7-season show, that's bound to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think my top 3 are going to destroy you, but let's hear what you have next.
Oh, really? You think so?
I know.
Okay. So. Well, we have Summer School.
Okay.
Mark Harmon, who is roped into getting in trouble, getting roped into teaching summer school for a bunch of kids that don't want to be there, of course.
Gotcha.
And it's a whole shenanigans summer.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, I'll give you that. I didn't expect that.
I didn't expect it either until I really started thinking about some teen movies and some of the ones that I really, really, truly enjoyed. And Summer School is one of them.
My number 3. My answer to Summer School is a late 90s film, and I think I identify with this film and its sequels very much because it was growing up with me, and I was just old enough to get into it. But my number 3 is American Pie. I love a film or TV show that never tells you somebody's name for some reason or another. Jim's dad, Eugene Levy, having a great career right now, but was killing it in those movies. I love the awkwardness. Yes, it's about sex. The whole movie's about sex, but you know, something that's such a part of your kid's life in a way, like just like wondering what girls think and facing those super awkward things. Definitely dialed it up to 11 in that movie, and it was a little raunchy for my taste, but love American Pie. Great piece of 90s teen movies. It's just part of the must watch list for the 90s.
Great choice. I definitely agree with that one. That one is tough to beat. But my next one goes to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yet
Oh,
another obvious choice, so
oh.
obvious, but it's like the pinnacle of the teen movies. You know, every student wants to skip school at some point. I would say most kids want to skip school at some point. And the way that Ferris knows that he can just do it and get away with it.
Yeah.
And he makes the most marvelous day.
He is the king. I'll give you that. There's something about Ferris Bueller that he is just a righteous dude.
He is. He's charming. You know, yeah, he's totally slick and gets away with way too much. But you know, he is a very charming guy, and he can get people to do what he wants and have a whole support and fan base.
What's great about him though is he's like the embodiment of the coolest dude of the 80s, of your the high school guy you want to be and you emulate, and the hero of the story is Ferris Bueller. And it was like John Hughes knew it in a way. And I love how John Hughes really got away from the darker stuff in that movie, because I think he gets really depressing sometimes for me, and I liked having a little bit of a lighter story. But yeah, Ferris Bueller is king, but my answer to that is the queen, Alicia Silverstone, Clueless. I think that movie completely is the answer to Ferris Bueller without actually saying it, because it's not a movie that is like winky or identifies things of the past. It just did its own thing, and it's like this rich LA crowd. I love Cher. I think she's so funny, and that she's so ditzy, but she really wants to do good for the world, and she's not stupid either. They kind of turn the dumb blonde thing on its head, because she's very smart. And they're how Clueless is technically not technically, but it's a prequel to a pseudo prequel to Legally Blonde. It works.
Yes. Yeah.
The whole law thing. I love it. Almost wish they had done that, but Clueless is my answer to Ferris Bueller.
That's another good choice. Very good choice. All right. So my number 5 is Better Off Dead.
Oh my God, I love Better Off Dead.
Savage Steve Holland created a trilogy of films. The third one, How I Got into College, isn't so great, but then again, it didn't have John Cusack in it. Better Off Dead, you know, is better off seeing than trying to explain it, because when you explain it, it sounds a little too dark. Here's this guy that's lost his shallow girlfriend and he wants to kill himself. Well, that doesn't sound very fun until you start watching the shenanigans and watching how he just is not successful at this and hilariously not successful. And meanwhile, building a relationship with the exchange student across the street. You know, it's charming, it's hilarious, and I love watching that one.
It's dark. It's definitely a dark idea, but you're totally right. Until you see it, it's very funny. It's like he just cannot do it. And he's trying the whole movie, and he just keeps failing, which is so funny. But it's not a funny subject. It definitely if you're going into this film, just be aware that the subject matter today might not be as well received, right. But just try to be open about it if you're looking for a laugh.
Right. Exactly.
My last one I have, and I saved this for last because I think this is the most iconic teen movie, period. 10 Things I Hate About You.
Really? I never saw that one. So tell me.
Okay. It has the ineptitude of the characters of clueless. These people are all very smart. So, and that was the thing about the 90s and teens in general, which I think was a little different than the 80s. But the teens of the 90s felt like these like go-getters, these very well-spoken, for some reason had a lot of money and have jobs that they shouldn't be able to have because of their school schedule, and going to concerts and stuff. But this movie is your I'll pay you to take this girl's sister out so that way the father will let the younger one date me. Classic, the bully pays the good guy to do it, and they fall in love. The characters are all really witty. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's in it. Heath Ledger's in it. Julia Stiles is the main girl. I forget the guy's name who plays Joey, but he's in a lot of movies, and he's like this greaser character. But 10 Things I Hate About You, fantastic movie. It just captures all of the 80s and 90s feels into one movie, I feel like. And there's this ridiculous dance number at the end that has nothing to do with the movie, but I do know that you won't like the song because I played it for you, or I played it at work, and you're like, who butchered that song? And I was like, well, it's a movie version, but that's why. But
so is the dance sequence kind of like a Bollywood style?
no, it's not. It's not
Okay.
like that. It's
Because I kind of dig that in some things. I think it's just like ridiculous to throw at the end of the movie, but
I like it too because it's like, why not? We're having a movie. I think what it is the guy and girl get together at the end. And it pans up and it's just like kind of around the school. It takes place in Seattle. It's a beautiful campus they have in that movie. It's kind of nice to watch just for that its own. But you see this band that they see earlier in the movie on the roof, like 12 stories up. It's really high up, singing the song. But there's a couple great scenes in it. There's one where Heath Ledger's on the bleachers of the school to like kind of give her this big romantic gesture, and he's singing I Love You Baby, and it's just really sweet and it's funny, and he's got the whole marching band in on it, so he's got this Ferris Bueller vibe to it. And there's this part with a poem at the end where she's reading the 10 Things I Hate About You, and it's super emotional, and it's one of the last movies where you're really rooting for the relationship that I remember. I feel like I haven't had a lot of that in a while, up until probably the two movies I mentioned, Love, Simon, and To All the Boys I Loved Before. But that's my piece on the teens. You want to go first for the romantic movies of the 80s, which I'm curious of how you're going to differentiate that between just romance and teen romance, because I feel like that's so hand in hand with the 80s.
it really is. And that's what made this category even harder for me, because I think every single one of my picks can be lumped into another genre, whether it's comedy or drama or fantasy, fairy tale. So I had a hard time really picking any straight up romantic films. So I'm going to start with Dirty Dancing.
Oh, that's a great one.
It did. I mean, part of the draw at first, at least, was Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey, because they are part of the Brat Pack from, the 80s genre. I love the teen movie genre. I love so much. But Dirty Dancing is just this ultimate romantic film of these two from completely different sides of the tracks falling in love and having this big obstacle to overcome and doing so anyway.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good choice. That's a tough one to combat. I'm trying to think of what I want to throw at you first. Oh, that's a really strong one. So I'm going to fight you back with another really strong one from the 90s. And my first pick for the 90s romance movies is going to be Pretty Woman.
Ah, okay. You're going there. All right.
Another good film challenging social norms. And, kind of just talking about judgment in itself. Granted, like, I don't know how I'd feel if that happened to me and some woman came with my limousine and offered me all that. But I think one of the best Julia Roberts roles there is. She's still sweetheart Julia, but she's also kind of very charismatic, which I like. Although personally, I think I like her best in Steel Magnolias. Great movie in itself. But yeah, Pretty Woman, her and Richard Gere. I hope they do a third movie together one day, because I think Runaway Bride is a really nice spiritual sequel to that. And it's just a really fun movie. I think you can't think of 90s film at all and Pretty Woman doesn't come up, Great movie.
Okay. Next on my list is a throwback again to teen movies, but Pretty in Pink.
Oh, okay.
You
Good.
have Ducky. Ducky serves as the ultimate underdog and in the friend zone.
Yep.
For forever. And I just, again, it's the wrong side of the tracks, different classes, different cliques, and yet these two find their way to each other anyway.
Yeah, it's a sweet one, and it's sad too. Like when that scene where she's like, "I don't want you to know where I live." I'm like, oh, that breaks my heart.
Right. There is an alternate ending. It was not filmed, but script-wise, there was an alternate ending in which Ducky got the girl.
I heard that.
Yep.
It probably should have been, but I don't know. I like the idea of the main guy also not caring about that stuff, and I think that's an important thing for them to have.
And how great is James Spader?
Yeah, he's great.
I mean, he's just like the ultimate sleaze bad guy. You know what I mean? The ultimate not.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love James Spader. Oh God, he's great in the office. All right, that's a good one. Pretty Pink. What am I gonna throw at you next? Can I give you a twofer?
Go for
one, because one's kind of more honorable. Well, no, they're kind of in the same vein of Pretty Woman and Runaway Bride. I'm going to give you Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail. I know Joe versus the Volcano is the third movie with them, but it has not come up to the quality of those other two movies. And it's not really about their romance in that one either. So that's why I stay away from that one. But I love You've Got Mail. I just think I like You've Got Mail better than Sleepless in Seattle. I'll say it. I'll put myself out there. The kid is freaking adorable in that movie, in Sleepless in Seattle. But the thing about You've Got Mail is you got Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, who are very capable actors, conversing with each other throughout the entire movie in narration and in person, and they are fantastic together. And it's an absolute crime that Sleepless in Seattle wastes those two's chemistry and doesn't even have it until the very, very end. They say one or two words to each other. But really, really like it. I like that it's a romance about people who are in their 40s and it's not about kids. I just think that, I'm a big fan of Grace and Frankie. I just feel like these things can happen at any time. And I think it's a shame that a lot of movies and shows make you feel like there's a very specific time where you fall in love, because it could happen at any time. And that's something I really love about You've Got Mail. And it's also just kind of talking on like, don't always expect it to come from the most, I guess Sleepless in Seattle does this too. It's like, don't expect your romance to necessarily come from what the storybooks or your parents told you and that first date. Like, they can come from the weirdest of places, and it could be the truest love there is. So my 2-for-1 right there for romance.
Okay. I got you. I got those two films, and I'll see you Overboard.
Huh, how dare you?
Now, while not technically a romance film, it's more like a comedy, and
it's a beautiful romance film.
But it is a beautiful romance film.
Oh my God. You hit me with that.
I can't help it. It's such an underrated film that just not talked about enough.
It's not talked about enough. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell are great. They're Hollywood royalty, and they deserve more respect, even though I think they really have it. Loved it. Love Overboard. I admit defeat on that answer in general. That was such a big family movie for me growing up. My mom always liked to say that she was like Goldie Hawn with all the kids, and yeah, it kind of was similar. And my dad was this big goofball. but totally messed up what he does. But their love is so pure, and I love that date they go on when she loses the bottom of her glass, and they're just so sweet together. That's a great pick. Jealous.
And it's really awful what he did to
Yeah,
her,
yeah,
making her think that she was their mother, but he really did need a mother for those poor boys. So I'm
yeah.
not condoning what he did, but I understand his reasons for doing it, and then him falling in love anyway. It's a great movie. So
I don't.
well done, and it is so funny. And
I'm mad they made a reboot.
yeah, it wasn't necessary. But the
They
thing I've learned, and people in my immediate circle, they know how much I really do not enjoy a lot of remakes and reboots and
yeah,
whatever else. Um, but as I've learned with a lot of remakes and reboots, if you just give it time, it just kind of goes away. It's on its own.
yeah.
And that's what the reboot did. I mean, I'm sad for the actors and everybody who worked on it because obviously they would have worked hard, but um, it did kind of go away on its own.
I think there are a lot of reboots that that when they're even coming out, they're going to be one of those, and that was one of them. It was just like it's like why are you even trying? Like it's not gonna. But there, I mean, I'll give it to some. I mean, I'm sure this Dune movie that's coming out is going to blow the old one out of the water. But totally agree with you there. Um,
Well, especially technologically speaking,
yeah,
it will blow it out of the water. I was never a big fan of the first Dune. Not that I didn't like it at all. I think I was just too young for it when I saw it.
yeah. I'm
Um,
interested to see what's going to happen with it.
yeah.
Um, you gave me a boat. I'll give you a boat. Titanic,
Okay.
1997, made James Cameron completely unable to make a film for another 10 years. I mean, we all seen this movie. You've seen The King of the World, Flying, Jack had enough room on the board, all that junk. But I mean, yeah, it's a blockbuster. And I know that's hard to swallow sometimes for like quality at the same time. And I totally agree with that with Avatar, not the series. Avatar series is the best thing that's ever happened to this earth. But Avatar the movie, The Blue People, not a fan. Ripped off Pocahontas too much. But Titanic, yeah, they made a love story out of a big tragedy, but it was a really good love story. Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio are great together. They have such good chemistry, and I'm really glad they brought them back together for Revolutionary Road. And it's just like a piece of cinema that no one ever forgets. It was amazing what they were able to do with that movie. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it.
While I wasn't the biggest fan of that movie, because that's just not a movie that I'm typically drawn to. I did take my mom to see it for her birthday. I I am in I can appreciate the fact that that kind of scenario, that kind of romance could have happened on
Mhm.
a Titanic.
Yeah, definitely. The Ship of Dreams is what they called it.
Okay, I'll see your Titanic, and I'll go to Can't Buy Me Love.
I don't know this one.
Can't Buy Me Love is 1987, is it? Oh God, I can't remember now. Somebody will have to correct me and let me know. Um, it's just a classic story of a guy who's infatuated with a girl, and she needs to shove the fact of having a boyfriend in people's faces. So
Uh,
she kind of gets him to just show as her fake boyfriend, and then of course, whatever
Gotcha.
happens, they fall in love. And as much as we will give spoilers here, there are just some things that I think people should check out themselves, particularly you if you haven't seen it. But it's a good feel good movie watching these two just develop feelings for each other despite being from two totally different social circles. Um, I think it's a good one.
I got two popular ones for my last ones. One in
Okay.
particular I think you're gonna like. Actually, I think you're gonna like both of them. My first one, weird one, Edward Scissorhands.
Okay.
Love Edward Scissorhands. I think Tim Burton was a huge contributor of the 90s. And that was the last time that I think he was really original. So I want to give it points for that because I think it's really interesting filmmaking and style that he has that hasn't really been recreated. Like even if you watch like something like Dark Shadows, which I think like what 6 years ago already, it's just not the same. Something's missing from Tim Burton's flavor that he had in the 90s. You have Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder, two powerhouses. You have Diane Weiss playing the mother in the movie, and she's just always great in whatever she's in. I love how it's like a comment. I'm not sure what the story is, and somebody in the comments, please tell me if you know. But it's based on an allegory of this mythical creature coming, like that lives in a certain part of the town, comes down to the town for the first time, and he's this different thing, and it's just all about how the people are affected by it. But I really love the love story between him and Winona. I just think it's really sweet. And she does everything she can to protect him, including not seeing him ever again. And I think that's such an interesting story and sad.
Right.
And
It is very sad.
And I love that scene where she's dancing in the snow. Really beautiful.
Well done. My last one I will throw at you is maybe obvious when it comes to 80s for romance films, but I love it nonetheless.
Uh-huh.
Princess Bride.
Oh, my God.
Such a fairy tale romance, but so funny at the same time. Hilarious film, but you really do find yourself just like Fred Savage. I could imagine so much Fred Savage being like me as a kid. Not another kissing film, and then you find yourself getting invested.
Yeah.
No matter what, despite the comedy, despite the fact that it's a kissing film, you have these two, getting together, and you're rooting for them the whole time. And I just love watching the romance develop. And that's just so weird for me to say, but I really, really.
You brought up something cool with that one too, Rachel, because something I think the 80s has a problem with is not looking like an 80s movie. But The Princess Bride, I think, along with something like Back to the Future. Oh man, are they both Robert Zemeckis?
No, Princess Bride is Rob Reiner.
Okay, sorry, wrong Rob. But I think those two series are just some of the most timeless movies. Or, I mean, not series, Princess Bride's just one movie, but one of the most timeless movies you'll see, because you couldn't pick it out if it was made in 60s, 70s, or 80s, or 90s. It's a great movie. It's a great choice. And fantastic love story of the Dread Pirate Roberts and the Princess Buttercup.
Yeah, Princess Buttercup and Wesley. Wesley, his alter ego Wesley. I don't know. I even though you know that they're going to end up together in the end. Just watching the adventure and all the hilarious characters that they run into along the way. Have fun storming the castle.
Yeah.
I laugh along with it every time, and every time I worry that they're not going to make it through. And I think that's a good hallmark of a movie, is when you can watch it that many times and still feel the same things and wonder if you're going to get the same ending.
You think it'll work? It'll take a miracle. And then you have the great Inigo Montoya.
Inigo Montoya. You kill me.
One of the best characters, I think, ever. Getting revenge for his father. Pure tale. I like that a lot. And I love the respect that him and Wesley give each other when they sword fight.
That's great.
Something great about that. Why do you wear a mask? Oh, they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone in the future will be wearing them. Weird.
I know. That is so weird right now.
I guess I'm not sure I'll beat you with that, because that's a great one. But I think one almost as iconic that I've been saving for the 90s romance is Ghost. Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, who has not aged in the past 40 years for some reason. And Whoopi Goldberg just killing it. I think one of her best movies. The Color Purple is one of the most acclaimed movies ever. But love ghost. Really interesting story. Patrick Swayze, and I think now that he's passed too, just something about that role or him in movies in general. It's almost like when a certain actor is like, they're here for a reason and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And in Patrick Swayze's, it reminds me of like they were here for the short amount of time they could be here to make these beautiful stories. And I love Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and her crying without closing her eyes, and those creepy ghosts in the movie. Great movie, super 90s. Like something about the way they dress for their office and the way they talk about work and the computer screens. Oh man, it just reeks of the 90s. So I think it's one of the best romance 90s movies there is.
Very nice. I think that's an excellent choice. That's a good film. That's a really good film.
Our final round is going to be tough with this, Rachel, because it's drama. So we're talking about the powerhouses of our times.
I know. This one was really tough. And again, it was one where I came up with an original 5 and my husband's like, well, what about this? And what about this? I'm like, oh God.
I'll give you, how about this? Why don't we do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and an honorable mention?
Okay. All right. Sounds good to me.
I still can't decide on which one I want to axe because I have 7 here. I will axe one now, but I'll let you know what it was because I want you to know what it was. But I'm going to take off of the list because I don't think it stands up to the rest of these. But My Girl was on there, and I love My Girl. I think that could be a podcast all its own, but really great coming of age movie. But I'm going to take it off. I think I have my list here. For do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
Sure, I'll go. So we're going to talk about dramas now, our favorite dramas. I had some odd choices here, some movies that really don't stand out to a lot of people. But I'm going to start with, well, this one everybody knows, Stand By Me.
Oh, good one.
Ultimate coming of age film.
Look at
Technically, it's considered horror because it's Stephen King, but it's really not a horror movie other than the subject matter of them going to find a dead body.
Look at us, Stephen King people.
I know. Stand By Me is just, it's a classic, and it's like I said, it's coming of age movie. These, developing relationship or continuing relationship of these 4 boys and how this particular event and their adventure affects their friendship.
Yeah. Not to mention you have, what's his name in there? River Phoenix.
River Phoenix. Yep.
I don't think Leo DiCaprio would have as much of an acting career as he does now if River Phoenix was still alive. Because I think they would be pulled in for a lot of the same stuff.
That's potentially true. I hadn't really thought about that, but yes.
I definitely think that. I've always kind of thought that. Great pick. I feel as if, since you did Stephen King, I have to give you my Stephen King pick, which I was going to save, but one of the best movies, I think, ever, and according to IMDb, the best movie ever, The Shawshank Redemption, of course. Andy Dufresne, you have the best narration in the world by Morgan Freeman, and it's just such a tight story. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, what planet are you from? And 2, for anyone who hasn't seen it, really awesome movie about a man who is wrongfully imprisoned and kind of just what life is like on the inside and being institutionalized, and one of Morgan Freeman's best movies ever. And it's really a lot about friendship too and getting through hard times together. It definitely deserves the title of best movie, best rated movie on IMDb, because I have a lot of trouble identifying anything I have wrong with this film. It is one of the best movies ever made. Shawshank Redemption.
And it's really funny because that is like the movie that started everybody wanting Morgan Freeman to narrate their lives.
Yep. Yeah.
You look at that movie and you go, that's where everybody got it from.
Let's hear it.
All right.
It's a Shawshank. I'd like to see you come back from that.
That's hard. I really can't because you are so right with that one. That movie is so like I hate to call anything perfect because things could always be better, but I really have a hard time finding anything wrong with that movie too. So that one's really going to be hard. So I'm going to have to scale it back a bit. Um, I'm going to go with Lucas.
Lucas, tell me.
Lucas, 1986 film with Corey Haim,
Okay.
Cary Green from The Goonies, and Charlie Sheen.
Okay.
Um, Story of a small, slight figured boy, young boy, who really wants to get the girl, so he wants to try out for the football team. And it's definitely a drama. It's
Yeah.
not something that can really be, crossing into other genres. And it does become a sad story
Yeah.
in some respects, but it is a good movie, and I think it's underrated and has been underviewed, and people should check that one out.
Good one. Really good one. I like that. Um, as good as it gets. Always been a big fan of Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt. Um, I just think it's one of his best roles in general. He plays a very unlikable character, and I believe it's Tourette's he has. Is that correct, Rachel? Or
I saw that movie when it first came out, but so I haven't seen it in a long time and I don't remember.
I don't want to identify what it is because I really don't recall what it was, and I don't want to wrongfully identify what his condition is. But he has a condition in which he kind of really says the most horrible thing that comes to his mind sometimes. And it's really interesting. I think it's one of purely, I like it because I think it's one of the best acting roles for both Helen Hunt and him. And I love Jack Nicholson. And it makes me really sad that he seems like he's done. And he hasn't made a movie since How Do You Know in 2010, which was garbage. Um, which is a shame because it was James L. Brooks who made As Good as It Gets, and you thought it was going to be his swan song, but too bad. As good as it gets. That's a good one.
Okay. I am going to go with, okay, now this movie isn't a straight up drama. There's a lot of comedy to it, and it's really lighthearted because it was I kind of see it as mostly a vehicle for the pop star in this at the time, but Desperately Seeking Susan.
Oh, I don't even know this one.
Um, a bored housewife is reading the newspaper and runs into ads from this man searching or desperately seeking a woman named Susan, who's gotten away from him. And this Susan is played by Madonna.
Hmm.
And the bored housewife is Rosanna Arquette.
Okay.
And she kind of decides to step into the role of Susan and become Susan, and she starts being mistaken for her.
Oh,
And so it's just like this wacky little kind of comedic drama.
funny. Madonna's a hit or miss with movies.
Yeah, but I really think that movie is excellent because it doesn't concentrate on Madonna. I mean, she's a big part of the movie. She is Susan after all, but it's more about Rosanna Arquette's character.
Probably best to keep Madonna in that space, with the exception of Evita. She was pretty good in that, but I don't know. You ever see Vision Quest?
I never did.
Oh, I love Vision. Well, my brother's a wrestler. My dad was a wrestling coach, so that's why we like it. But they almost named that movie Crazy for You because her song is featured in it so much, and she's in a 2-second scene. It's really funny that she had such an effect on that movie. But I guess it was her popularity. Okay, so what did I give you? I gave you Shawshank and As Good as It Gets. Pulp Fiction, my number 3. Tarantino for me is hard sometimes because he's great. He writes the most interesting dialogue ever and makes you want to have conversations with these characters. But for me, I have to be in a Tarantino state of mind to watch his movies. I love his movies, but it's not something I can watch all the time. It really depresses me, and it just brings you to dark places. I love Pulp Fiction. I love Kill Bill. I love Reservoir Dogs. I love almost all of Tarantino's stuff, but the one thing I can say for Pulp Fiction is a really healthy mix of super, super dark and relatively lighter. It's not as dark as Reservoir Dogs, but it's definitely not as fun. And I mean, fun is a weird word to throw around it, but it's not as animated and silly as Kill Bill. I like the format. I think he's very famous for doing that format where it's like the 4 or 5 different point of views and the kind of intersecting things. And then without Pulp Fiction, I would not have Trick or Treat. And I love Trick or Treat. And I just think I respect that he filmed it that way or edited it that way. And it's really interesting. No matter how many times you watch it, I don't know that I could tell you what story takes place in order of which, having seen the movie maybe 10, 15 times, still to this day. Really, really great movie. And it was a comeback vehicle for John Travolta, which he came back, and I think he should go back to where he was after that because it was the only good movie he made. And Samuel L. Jackson's great in it.
You know, when I first saw Pulp Fiction in the theater, I did not like it at all. I didn't get it. I didn't get it. It was the first movie that I had seen of that kind. But when I was able to watch it again at home, I gave it another shot and I really did enjoy it a second time. I was able to piece things together better. I got a better feel for the flow, and it is an incredible movie.
Super artsy, very hard.
Okay, next I'm going to go with Eddie and the Cruisers.
Tell me about it.
Eddie and the Cruisers is about a rock singer with a band who kind of gets overwhelmed by his stardom and fakes his death.
Oh,
he appears to fake his death. I'm not going to tell you that one. I'm not going to tell you whether he actually faked his death or he really died. And the whole movie is about the anniversary of his death, and a reporter is trying to put together an expose or just a documentary on him, and is interviewing his bandmates and his closest friends. It's got Michael Paré. I fell in love with the film. I think it's 1983 or 4. And I've always loved that one. It's just, I love the style of it. I love Michael Paré. I love the flashbacks to the 60s. It's a great film.
That's awesome. I got to check that one out. I was going to put this one at number 1, but due to recent years, I'm going to have to leave it at my number 2 spot here. American Beauty. It's such a shame about, why am I drawing a blank on it? Kevin Spacey. Because he's a fantastic actor and he brought so much to so many movies, including this movie. So I get a little sad sometimes about the films that he was in and having to look back at it with like a negative point of view because of who he is. And it's not fair to all the other people in that project because Annette Bening, Thora Birch, everyone involved was amazing and so much symbolism. And I love the thing about the rose and like the poison that could be below it and how the appearances of what American life is supposed to look like, and playing the right music at dinner time and having just the right clogs on when you garden. I love how it comments on that and how it really criticizes it. And it's one of I think it kind of almost holds a candle to movies you'd see now with characters like Thora Birch and the boyfriend, the weird video camera guy, because they're not heroes of what you would see from that time frame, those types of characters. They're more something that you would see now. So very ahead of its time. Annette Bening is so, so good in it. I can't say enough about any of the performance in this movie. American Beauty is really, really good if you can get past Kevin Spacey. I'm not defending him in any way. I'm just saying his acting was superb. His character is greatly written. It's a really cool look at like a midlife crisis.
It's certainly a tough thing because I really try hard, and I fail at this sometimes because my head gets in the way, but I really try to separate the artist from the person themselves and the things they've done and from the art itself. I want to be able to enjoy a Kevin Spacey film that I loved before. I mean, his work in The Life of David Gale and K-Pax, I mean,
Oh,
great stuff.
so good.
I know K-Pax was so good.
So good.
Seven, I mean, everything is so good that I hate to have that tarnished memory. So I'm really trying to hard to, no matter who he is as a person, I enjoy his work and what he did.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I think it depends on the person too. Like for me, like I can't separate Chris Brown from that situation. Um, but it's also he didn't make the project we're looking into wasn't like a movie that he made with like several hundred other people. It was his music career, and I feel like musicians a lot of times it's so much about them, and that's something I like about film and movies more than I like about music. But yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to. I mean, I love Baby Driver. It's one of my favorite recent movies. But
Baby Driver was great.
great movie, and he's great in it too, which sucks. But yeah.
Okay. Well, my next one, and I am going to have I think I'm going to have two honorable mentions, but I'm going to go, I'm going to go with my number one of the original five, The Outsiders.
Oh, great one. Okay.
Can't have a favorites column without having The Outsiders in it. You've got a lot of the Brat Pack in it. You've got a great story. It's a simple story and teenagery issues and social issues.
I love the brothers. I love the love for each other in it. How much like they care about each other.
And a young Diane Lane.
Yeah, young Diane Lane. Great name, Pony Boy.
Pony Boy, Soda Pop. I don't know how Daryl got to be just Daryl.
Lucked out.
I mean, granted, they call him Derry, but
Yeah, maybe it's more of a respect thing.
Yeah, I mean, then you have Dallas Winston.
Yeah.
Johnny Cade.
That's a great one. Definitely an iconic piece of film right there.
Two-Bit Matthews, Steve Two-Bit Matthews.
I don't know how mine's going to compare to that last one you gave, because I think mine is objectively very excellent, but there's so much heart in yours. I'm going to just throw it at you. Oh, wait, didn't you have an honorable mention as well?
I do have two honorable mentions, but I really would like to hear your fifth first.
My fifth is Forrest Gump.
Very nice.
Tom Hanks is the greatest. I'm a little disappointed I didn't hear Splash for your romance movies. I love Splash.
It came this close. It came this close.
Splash. But I think Tom Hanks is one of the best actors ever. And there's nothing to dispute how wonderful as a person that man is based on his fan interactions. They're hilarious. And two, just one of the greatest talents there's ever been. And Forrest Gump, I love it. I love how you go through so many time frames and he's there for it. And it introduced me to the 60s. And I love how the movie's about destiny and like, is there destiny, or is it predetermined for you, or is it the choices you make, and how it's a little bit of both, and how you don't have to follow like a fixed way of believing it. And I just love it. And him and Jenny, one of the best, one of the most quotable movies ever, one of the best, not relationships, because Jenny, I don't think is a good girl to him ever. But it's very,
she was very damaged.
The love that he has for her is sweet. And it's like his magnum opus. And kind of the same thing. It's more of a Tom Hanks thing from the 90s. I put The Green Mile as my honorable mention because another fantastic movie. And I love his movies to be so different from one another, but still so great.
She's such a damaged person. And it's like his pure love for her is just like the one thing that keeps her remotely grounded.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Okay, so I'm gonna list my two honorable mentions because it was really that difficult. One is Mommy Dearest.
Oh.
Yep, a fascinating look at the daughter's take on her relationship with Joan Crawford and what life was like as a child of Joan Crawford. Of course, it's up to speculation how much is true.
Mhm.
but it is fascinating nonetheless because
Yeah.
there's got to be some truth in at least some of the things there.
Yeah.
And she just seemed like such a complicated woman.
What was the other one?
La Bamba.
Oh, I love La Bamba.
My husband reminded me, he's like, don't you love La Bamba? And I'm like, yes, I do love La Bamba. Story of Richie Valens. Lou Diamond
Yeah.
Phillips is just an ace in this, and I love the feel of that movie, even though you
Yeah.
know it's going to have the ultimate tragic ending.
It makes me so
Watching Richie grow up,
it makes me so sad because he's terrified of that happening. He's having those nightmares, and
right?
yeah, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. I like that one though. It kind of, and I mean, I don't mean to compare just because of the cultures, but it reminds me a bit of um, Selena. Same kind of thing. It's like this big star, but you know what's going to happen to her at the end, and it's horrible. And they're both like such pure souls, and yeah, that's a good
Right.
one. I'm glad you brought that up. I see why it's an honorable mention because it doesn't stay. It's different. It doesn't feel like it would be one of those top picks, but it's somewhere.
Yeah, and that movie has always meant a lot to me. You know, I saw it a few times in the theater. I just it is it's full of heart. The way they did it was so good, and
So sad.
it is sad. I enjoy the journey. I love seeing Richie's life. You know, do you have any honorable mentions?
No, I think the Green Mile was it, and I would say My Girl was the other one. Just because I don't know where that would fall, but I just really love that movie, and I think it's a really important movie for that time. But it's just not as big. I mean, it's big. It's very much in people's consciousness, but it's like it's not Forrest Gump, you know. It's not Pulp Fiction. It's this kids movie, but it's got a lot of interesting topics, and that scene where she's talking to Thomas J and
Oh,
where's his glasses? Oh my god, it just rips my heart out. Yeah, that's
I
a
still cry. I'm not a big crier at movies, but I still cry when I see that scene.
yeah. I became a much bigger crier later on in my life. I used to never cry in movies. Um, the Coco had me in a freaking mess the other day around Halloween time. That was really bad.
I still have not seen that.
It's a tough watch. If you've lost anyone, I was thinking of my mom and my grandmother and like family that I haven't seen in like years, and it's just like wow, I can't believe how much I'm thinking of this person from that movie. But good movie if you're looking for it. Um, I guess to make my closing statement on the '90s again, everything she said is BS. Which should have been in one of my comedies. I don't know why My Cousin Vinny wasn't, but I think I'm saving that for an episode of its own one day because Joe
Oh,
Pesci.
we could make an episode out of My Cousin Vinny.
Let's save that for season 2. Let's just stamp that right now. My Cousin Vinny, season 2.
Okay.
But for my case, the '90s, like I said in the beginning of this, the '90s, I believe was the last generation of adventures and magic, and I don't think nowadays there's some disconnect with the phones and having to write that unlimited source of information and this bailout into all of your problems and why it's not necessarily working because somebody removed the SIM card and they can call 911, but they don't know that's not how that works. um, but yeah, I really think it makes me think the Rugrats. It makes me think Pokemon, Radio Flyer. Like it was the last time kids could really build and do something and have this coming of age story that wasn't so wrapped up in what's happening today in the internet. So that's why I love the '90s movies. I definitely feel like there's a great place for the '80s amongst our film history, but I think the '90s is a great time for nostalgia. I think it's different than the '80s version of it. There's some sort of comfort, and I think, like I said earlier, I think there's a big time of peace in the world. But there's a real comfort to '90s. Like I watched Father of the Bride, and I feel like, oh, this is the way life should just be, you know. But yeah, that is why I believe the '90s movies absolutely obliterates the '80s.
Okay, then. I will give you that the 90s had some good stuff. I think The Sandlot was overlooked in the 90s.
I
I'll give you that.
I had that on here actually. That was in my drama coming up eight section, and I cut it out because I'm like, well, I don't know
But
how it will fit. But I love
I'm,
Sam.
I'm, I'm not going to talk you into a win, so I'm going to go back into the 80s just for a minute. As I have shown, the 80s may have been larger than life and full of flair. Woo! But many of these films were also introspective. They made us look at ourselves and examine our hearts and souls. The ones that didn't, well, they were just for fun. I implore all of you to look within yourselves and find the true only answer to this, that the 80s rule.
Well, I think we can all agree that 2000s were just ridiculous.
I agree with you there.
Anyway, awesome first BFF battle between Joey and Rachel. We're definitely going to be more specific with our future ones. This was our first one that we wanted to tackle with a bunch of different movies we wanted to talk about. So thank you for sticking with us today. Do you have anything you want to add before we close out, Rachel?
No, I just think that I made my case loud and clear.
I think I've made my case loud and clear. Not that you just said that, but let the comments show who the real winner is, or if it's just one comment of a friend of ours who happened to listen to this whole thing. Thank you for choosing me as the winner. Anyway.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you all for joining us today. I'm very happy that I was able to beat Rachel for all of you.
Nice try there. If you like what you heard here today, give us a big thumbs up. Join in on the discussion by leaving a comment. And while you're at it, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss new episodes. See you next time.
See ya.